Hey, I think most of you will remember that recently I posted a rant video where I was a little upset with Brett Kavanaugh and the rest of the Supreme Court, or at least most of them. Recently, the liberal justices, or I should say the anti-freedom justices on the Supreme Court, decided to allow the state of New York, the liberal leaders of the state of New York, to manipulate the Supreme Court into not ruling on a very important Second Amendment case. Now, the conservative judges of the Supreme Court said, hey, the New York representatives are manipulating the court. They are blatantly trying to just cause us not to rule on something and not settle the matter so that they can later violate the same freedoms of the American citizens. But Brett Kavanaugh didn't see it that way, and he sided with the liberals to allow the court to be manipulated. And I wasn't happy about that. But a lot of people said, oh, he had no choice. It was because it was moot and blah, blah, blah. No, that's bullcrap because, like I said, the conservatives on the court saw through the manipulations, at least acknowledged the manipulations and said we should not be a part of this. And he chose, like I said, to side with the liberal, the anti-freedom justices. So I was upset with him. But a lot of people also said, well, but he said we need to hear another important Second Amendment case right away, that it's very important that we hear one as soon as possible. And I'm like, well, we'll see. Well, we got our chance to see because Friday, 10 let's just say 10 cases concerning the Second Amendment were held in conference. That means they were seen by a Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court could pick and choose from these ones which ones they wanted to hear. Now, when a case goes to conference like that in the Supreme Court, it only takes 4 justices to actually agree to hear the case. Just 4. Doesn't mean to be a majority, just 4 justices. So we already have 3 that we know are definitely conservative justices that would want to hear a case. So all we'd have to do is have Kavanaugh side with them and it'd be heard. And since he said, got to hear a Second Amendment case right away, you know he's going to choose one. Well, the 10 cases went to conference on Friday. There were a lot of them deal with the same thing. There's several of them that deal with, your right to carry a gun and shall issue versus may issue, etc. Then there's ones that deal with buying guns across state lines, having guns denied to you for the rest of your life if you're ever treated for mental illness involuntarily. There's lots of different topics, all of which are very important. So now you're probably going to ask yourself, okay, of all those cases that went to conference Friday, which ones did Brett Kavanaugh follow through on and say, we need to hear this case? And what was that specific case about or cases about? Well, today they announced which ones would be moving forward, and it is none of them. Not one of the cases got 4 justices to agree to hear them. Not one of the Second Amendment cases. That sounds funny since Brett Kavanaugh said we need to hear one right away, right? Well, I guess maybe he's not as honest as a lot of people like to think he is. But they didn't agree to hear any of them. Not one made it through conference. Now, don't get too depressed here because just because they didn't make it through conference doesn't mean they were dismissed. They have not yet been dismissed. Now, it isn't uncommon that when there's high publicity cases that if they don't agree to hear them, they later dismiss them quietly under the darkness of night when people aren't thinking about it or when something else is going on. So they could all be dismissed for all we know. But right now, they're not dismissed, which means they'll hear them again on the 14th of May. They'll go to conference once more. And at that time, if they don't get 4 votes then, or at least 4 justices willing to hear them then, the likelihood that they'll get selected in a third conference is very rare. It does happen sometimes, but it's rare. It's not uncommon to be chosen in your second conference, but it is very unlikely that you'll make it to a third if you don't get chosen in the second, especially high-profile cases such as this. So right now, they sidestepped the Second Amendment again, which means 4 justices did not agree to hear them, so you can pretty much guess which justices didn't. Like I say, no reason to panic yet because they haven't been dismissed. But I would be paying attention to see if they get dismissed. And I'd be putting some pressure on the so-called conservative justices like Kavanaugh to say, hey, here's what you said, here's what you did, why are they not the same thing? Why are you not agreeing to hear these Second Amendment cases yet? Because we need to put the pressure on between now and the 14th. Because like I said, if they don't select some of these cases on the 14th, the likelihood of them going to a third conference, it gets slimmer and slimmer. So for those of you out there who want to defend Kavanaugh, how about you stop defending him and you start encouraging him to do the right thing? How about instead of falling for, oh, well, he had no choice because the case was moot, and they never hear moot cases. Yes, they do. They do all the time, because they easily can say, just because you change the law doesn't mean you can't change it back in the future. So we have to settle the topic. So instead of defending Kavanaugh when he has done nothing defensible, how about you start encouraging him to do the right thing before it's too late?